Let's move to other matters. Now, I don't know about you, and obviously I'm not able to speak to you because I wasn't here last week, but I absolutely celebrated the fact that proper prison terms were handed down to those M25 protesters. Roger Hallam, 5 years for coordinating the protests that disrupted the M25 over 4 days in 2022, during which 45 activists climbed gantries on the motorway. Others, such as Daniel Shaw, Lucia Whitaker de Aubray, Louise Lancaster and Cressida Gethin, were each given 4 years in jail after being found guilty, along with Hallam, of conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. These jail terms, I'm delighted to tell you, exceed those given to 2 Just Stop Oil activists who scaled the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge in Dartford Crossing in October 2022. Hooray. My heart soared. 5 years, so hopefully that'll be 2.5. There won't be the other mitigation, and 2 years for the other. Personally, it's not enough. I would go further, but at least it's a start. However, not everyone is in accord. One of the figures involved in a growing protest over this, more than 1,100 now, lawyers, academics, artists, celebrities, calling for an urgent meeting with the Attorney General over this, one of whom is Chris Packham. Now, Mr. Packham spoke with my LBC colleague Carol Vorneman on Sunday, explaining why he feels so strongly about this and why our laws on protest need to be reviewed more generally.
These 5 people have been given disproportionately high sentences, the highest that we've ever seen for peaceful protest in the UK, certainly since the 1930s. I think that it amounts to harassment and intimidation of climate protesters. They're trying to keep us off of the streets. And it follows in the wake of laws that were Liberty have taken the former government to court. Suella Braverman put those laws in place. Yes. The Police Crimes Courts and Sentencing and Courts Bill, which came up with the phrase public nuisance, but it's ambiguous in its context, and this provides difficulties for both the protesters, knowing how far they can go, and of course for the police, knowing when they should and could properly arrest them.
Now, those 5 that I listed, they've now been known as the Whole Truth 5. The campaigners include Chris Packham, you just heard there, Dale Vince, the millionaire Labour donor, Sir Geoffrey Bindman, one of the country's most distinguished human rights lawyers, Dame Tracy Emin, Annie Lennox, Toby Jones, who's the star of Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, Danny Boyle, the director of Train Spotting, and some others. And, I'm so sorry, former Archbishop of Canterbury, now Lord Williams. Rowan Williams, now Lord Williams. It's also the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner has expressed concern. Can I perhaps suggest the United Nations Human Rights want to start looking at parts of Africa and Asia, where I would suggest there's more abuses going on than happening here. But at the heart of it is a very simple one, the amount of time these people have gone to jail. By the way, in that clip, Chris Packham referenced Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary. She will be in this seat in a little under 2 hours' time. Suella Braverman here taking your calls from 10. But let's talk now at 9 minutes after 8. First with Dr. Bing Jones, who is a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, and joins me now. I have not yet, and I have to say I was not here last week, so I don't know if you've opined on this yet, Doctor, but your view on the present terms handed down. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes. Well, we've heard your introduction,
yep.
Nick.
Yep.
Your lock 'em up introduction.
Yes, sir.
So here is the other side of the coin.
Please.
My introduction. We're facing a world which is terrifyingly hot. We're right on the edge of tipping off a cliff, where the heat will be irreversible. It's getting worse by the day. It's caused by our burning fossil fuels, which we've doubled in the last 30 years, and which, instead of going down or maybe even levelling off, are going up. Every single major fossil fuel company is planning major increases, right? So we've got a massive, massive problem. The biggest problem humanity's ever faced. It's getting worse. And instead of making it better, we're actually actively making it worse. So we've got a demand. Just Stop Oil is demanding that the government does something completely practical, which is today to start negotiating a treaty, an international binding treaty to stop all burning and extraction of fossil fuels by 2030.
Doctor, you've given me a very accurate depiction of the problem. My question was actually your reaction to the prison terms that were handed out, if I could move you to that.
these are sinister, extreme sentences. These are ordinary people who are trying to prevent the disaster that I've just outlined. It's a disaster
How does stopping the M25 prevent the disaster you've outlined?
The problem is that the fossil fuel industry has been working for 30, 40 years to tell the story, Nick, which you repeat over and over again, that the only way forward is business as usual.
No, I've not said
used
that respectfully.
May I finish? The fossil fuel industry has basically used its £1 billion of profit to lobby MPs, to buy, to pay for political parties, to fund whole chunks of the media. And the story is out that the only way forward is to go on burning fossil fuels.
Right.
It's wrong. Fossil fuels.
My question was, how did disrupting the M25 for 4 days 2 years ago, how did that help prevent that? That was my actual question.
Okay. The problem is that because the politics has been bought by the status quo, politics is not available. And because the media has been bought by the fossil fuel industry.
How has that occurred, Doctor?
The only way to get somebody like me onto a programme like yours to speak to your good audience on their way to their work and on their way to school, the only way to do it is by being either outrageous or by being disruptive. And disruption works. Before you say anything else, disruption works. We've had loads and loads of situations in the past which have shown that disruption works. We are a fire alarm. The world is on fire, and you can't expect the fire alarm to be comfortable. We're a burglar alarm because our futures are being stolen, and we've got to be disruptive.
Lastly, the colleagues that you work with Just Stop Oil, when they see the length of term handed down last week, 5 years for one individual, 4 years for some others, will that deter them in any way, shape or form? What will their reaction be?
Of course it won't deter. You can't legislate the climate crisis away. Shooting the messenger doesn't get the message to disappear. Right. You've got a whole load of problems here, and we have got to go on disrupting. We had a march of 100,000 people with no media coverage, shot some custard powder on Stonehenge. We got 100 million views in 3 days.
Dr. Bing-Jones, I'm grateful for your input. I have to finish there because I do need to get someone else, but thank you. You're a Just Stop Oil spokesperson. 13 after 8. Listening to that, Joseph Cotry-Monson, who's a legal commentator and director of the firm Mary Monson Solicitors on Fleet Street. Let's talk a little bit about the sentences handed down then. 5 years for one, 4 years for a number of others. Does that broadly fit in with the tariff as you would have seen it, Joseph? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nick. Good morning to listeners. Yeah, I mean, it's substantially aggravated, but I also think that what we heard earlier, the quote from Chris Packham, who I was a big fan of on the Really Wild Show when I was a little boy, he talks about an ambiguity and people not knowing how far they should go. No. Nick, 2023 Public Order Act, Section 7, conspiracy to cause public nuisance, interfering with national infrastructure. This law was created for these guys, and it was created as a result of public sentiment. You know, it's divisive. I think we can agree on that. I mean, there's a minority of very vocal people here who think they've got a right to disrupt the majority because the crisis is so big. We've heard the very eloquent spokesman talk about the fact that the press are bought and paid for and public opinion works in a certain way and all of that. I'm not a politician. I'm a lawyer. Why was the sentence so long? Well, it was incredibly sophisticated. This wasn't a question of, as some commentators appear to have suggested, being prosecuted for having been on a Zoom. This was people who had gone to great lengths to coordinate, as you rightly point out, Nick, 45 people, almost militarily, to disrupt traffic and to do what it says on the tin, to interfere with this national infrastructure. 150 hours, I understand it, of disruption to routes. Yeah, it's divisive that these people should be sent to prison. It's the law provides for it. The mechanism is democracy. The mechanism is election if you don't agree with it. Unless you believe in the narrative, which I'm not speaking against, that our politicians, our system is just so bought and paid for that even just mass protest, which doesn't involve directly disrupting other people, for example, the Million Man March, Don't Attack Iraq, these types of protests, they have an impact. The reason they work, of course, is because it's many, many, many people, not 45, doing something general and marching, not 45 people who think they're right and really believe that they've got the future on their side and all of that, legislating for the nurse who wants to get to the hospital and the single mother who wants to get her kids to school.
Always enjoy speaking with you, Joseph. Thank you. Joseph Cottery-Monson, legal commentator and director of the Mary Monson Solicitors firm, to be found on Fleet Street. It's very simple. For the campaigners, these sentences are anything other than insanity, they would say. For others, of course, it is a message that if you could stop disrupting points of national infrastructure, which side are you on? 8:16 LBC News headlines. Thomas Watts.
As senior police